Hi there. I wanted to tell you a story that goes quite a long way back to my days when I worked as a hospital doctor. And it's one story that has impacted me over the course of my life in understanding how much of an effect we can have through our work, not just on individuals, but on the world around us, because of the impact that they have on the world around them. Um, so it was quite a while ago, as I said, and I was working in the medical department of a hospital, and I was on call, and we accepted the admission of a man who had a condition called fibrosing alveolitis, which is basically a progressive deterioration of the lungs as they become stiff rather than flexible and spongy. They become increasingly stiff and less able to handle the transfer of oxygen from the lungs into the blood. So increasing breathlessness is a problem, and it's a pretty unpleasant condition. And at that stage, certainly incurable, but actually had to be managed. And obviously, somebody with a reduced capacity in their lungs, any other problem with their lungs was quite a serious threat to life itself. And this gentleman was admitted, and he had this condition, but he also had a chest infection. So we started to treat him with intravenous antibiotics and supportive therapy, oxygen and stuff like that. But his condition deteriorated, and we had to admit him to the intensive care unit, where he had obviously slightly more intensive therapy and care. But even despite that, his condition continued to deteriorate, and we had to make the difficult decision of placing him on assisted ventilation, where we would sedate him and put him on effectively a breathing machine which would breathe for him. The biggest problem we faced with that was that once that was done, getting such patients at that time off the ventilator was an extremely difficult task, and we knew that we were making a decision that actually might be a final decision. Although it looked good in the short term, the long-term outcome of putting somebody like that on a ventilator was very risky in that sense, but we needed to do it because otherwise he was going to die. So we put him on the ventilator, and his condition didn't really improve. It continued to become a problem. We couldn't get his chest infection cleared very easily, and it got worse and worse, and we were looking at the reality that we might never manage to get him back off the ventilator and back into life. We were facing this challenge very straightforwardly, talking with his family and supporting them, and it was obviously a very distressing time for all involved, including ourselves. We never like to get placed in that position, but it is a part of our work life. So with this scenario going on, I pray for all my patients, whether they know it or not. I'm praying for them under my breath, just in the course of life. I don't have to lay hands on people to pray for them. They can benefit from my prayers without any direct interaction. And then on this one day, God said to me, "Okay, Pete, I want you to pray and fast for 24 hours for this particular patient." Now that was an okay request. It's a slightly unusual one in the sense that if God asked me to do that for all my patients, I would have been extremely thin and probably not able to do my job because I wouldn't have energy. I'm not very good at going without food. I get a bit lightheaded and stuff like that. So I chose my moment to basically I fasted for 24 hours and prayed for this gentleman. And God sustained me through that. Fortunately, I wasn't on call overnight or anything like that. I was just doing a normal day's work. Otherwise, I'm not sure I would have managed it. And so I came back in the next day, basically, and found a significant improvement with this chap's health. And cutting a long story short, within 24 hours, we got him off the ventilator. And we got an extraordinary breakthrough, which none of us could explain medically. It was such a quick turnaround, and he was so suddenly not just off the ventilator, but back restored to a good level of function that I couldn't put it down to anything other than the intervention of God alongside excellent medicine. As he was recovering and we sent him back to normal ward, I got to know him a bit better, and I discovered he was a man of active Christian faith. I I told him what had happened basically, and he thanked me for my spiritual intervention in his life, and effectively acknowledged that God had saved his life. And he said that that was for a particular purpose. He knew what it was. He was a man who had carried a significant level of responsibility and influence within the nation of this country in a political sense. And he was aware that there was still more work for him to do on this earth. And in fact, what happened was that in the subsequent years that he lived, he was able to enact things within the political life of our nation that are still actually effective to this day, that number of years later. And so I always remember that word from God to pray and fast. Now, I didn't know of this gentleman's influence at the moment that God told me that. I just was obedient and was caring for an individual. But as I cared for that individual and saw God intervene as we went about our good medicine, then I hadn't realised just the impact that one individual having that life given back to him would have into the life of our nation. So I've always remembered that, and I would encourage you that whenever you're interacting with individuals, you never know how far the influence of their life is going to reach. And it's such a privilege, isn't it, to be part of the healthcare world where we can touch individuals in such an obvious and meaningful way with every working day that we have.